Hey y'all, it's Dr. Know-It-All with Tesla's tentative robotaxi release date only 4 days away. I wanted to take a look at the lie of the land and where full self-driving is right now, more or less from a technical perspective. I was doing research on this with Grok, and I can actually show you that. We had a conversation over and over, and I needed lots and lots and lots of details, doing deep research for me just to make sure I didn't miss anything important and to separate out the signal from the noise. There is a lot of noise right now. There are a lot of articles about how bad full self-driving is, how it's never going to work, etc., etc. So anyway, I want to, as much as possible, focus on the facts more or less to see where full self-driving is, what sort of information we have about what the model looks like right now, what its status is, and there's interesting information about Grok in here, and also a first delivery in addition to the June 22nd rollout. I know that they picked June 22nd because it's Misinformation's birthday, and so they wanted to give her a birthday present, I'm sure. That's the exact reason and the entire reason for it, not the fact that it's a Sunday morning and Sundays are relatively quiet traffic-wise and everything, so it's a kind of a soft rollout. Anyway, let's go ahead and start with Ashok Elluswamy, who is the head of this whole thing, and I've pointed this out in a previous video. He posted on June 13th a sweat or hot face emoji. They are obviously burning the midnight oil trying to get this thing out the door and ready to roll by the end of June, so very, very cool. We also have a post from a couple of days earlier with the robotaxi. This was the first one that was actually spotted. And Ashok Elluswamy here is quoting Jim Fan, Dr. Jim Fan, slowly at first and then much more quickly. And actually, I think that's actually a quote from Ernest Hemingway originally. They said, "How did you go bankrupt?" And he said, "Slowly at first and then quickly." And actually, I took a break for a second and went down a quick rabbit hole, and it actually seems like it might be a misquote. This is often the case. But anyway, it occurs very slowly, then all at once. This was his bankruptcy thing. Jim Fan has used that as well. And of course, there's an even more pithy and succinct version of that, gradually and then suddenly. That is an excellent way to describe an exponential curve, either in the positive direction like AI or in the negative direction. Anyhow, as we have noted, Ashok Elluswamy is not one who is given to a lot of hyperbole, so when he says things, you can tend to believe them. He tends to be pretty conservative in the way that he talks, and then all of a sudden he's like, it gets really excited, and you're like, okay, it's getting real now, and we can kind of count on this. But anyway, so obviously they're working very hard, but also I think that there is a confidence on the team. That's the sort of external view of this. Of course, I don't know anything about what's actually going on. So now let's take a look at a couple of Elon Musk posts where he actually talks a little bit more about details about what full self-driving is, what the model is, how it is all working and everything. Anyway, on June 10th, so that's about a week ago, he said Austin is much, much greater than LA for robotaxi launch, LOL. So I assume that's regulatory approval, things like that. Anyway, so he started that off, and then Owen Sparks responded to that. When do first public rides start? We are all drooling over that one tiny clip from today, and Elon responded June 22nd tentatively, so that's where that started. There was never a Tesla announcement about June 12th. News media was saying that Tesla missed their date on June 12th, but that was never actually said. This is the first actual date, and of course, tentatively, so let's take this with a grain of salt. Might be pushed back a week, who knows? Anyway, he said we are being super paranoid about safety, so the date could shift, and I think that's a completely reasonable stance to take on this whole thing. And then, here's a really interesting little tidbit of information. First Tesla that drives itself from factory, end of line, all the way to a customer house is June 28th. So clearly they've got somebody's house in mind, and I would assume that would be in the Austin area because that makes the most sense because it's already sort of geofenced and they've done the practice and everything. But customer X, whoever that person is who lives on street Y in Austin, could see their vehicle arrive on June 28th by itself with no person driving the car. So that's kind of cool. Obviously, this is not going to work for if you live in New York City or something like that. You're not going to have this car. You wouldn't even want your car driving 1,500 miles across the country because then you'd have 1,500 miles on the car. So obviously you would want to put that on a truck and have it go to a showroom. But after it got to the showroom, there's no reason why it couldn't drive the last few miles from that showroom to your house on its own. So this is a really interesting little addition to the robotaxi thing, is that cars could start delivering themselves. And that is, number one, it's kind of cool and a bit of a show-off thing because nobody else can do that at this point. But number two, over time, it could save quite a bit of money because it takes a lot of human hours to shuttle vehicles around from factories or showrooms to individual people's houses and everything. So that could be a big time and money saver for Tesla, and also for customers who won't have to drive to the store anymore to get their car. They could just have it show up in their driveway. So very, very cool. And then if we dial things back about a week and a half before that, Elon said for the past several days, Tesla has been testing full self-driving Model Y cars, no one in the driver's seat, on Austin public streets with no incidents. So very interesting that this actually happened for a while before people actually caught it. He said that they were a month ahead of schedule. Next month, first self-delivery from factory to customers. So he had already made a promise about that. Then Owen Sparks, who Elon seems to like to respond to, said, a big step forward. If I fly to Austin end of June, would anyone be able to test out the network, or is it going to be invite only at first? Elon said, sure. So if this actually comes to pass and cars are driving around and there's a way to get on a list or something, I may have to take a quick trip to Austin at the end of the month. And speaking of trips, tomorrow through this weekend, I'm going to be up in Muskegon, Michigan for the Tesla event there. So please do come and say hi if you live in the area. It's going to be a really cool event, and I and a ton of other people are going to be there. So come say hi to us. And back to Elon posts, Elon mentioned, as we all pretty much know, these are unmodified Tesla cars coming straight from the factory. In other words, the robo-taxis, aside from the little robo-taxi sticker, of course, meaning that every Tesla coming out of our factories is capable of unsupervised full self-driving. So that's pretty cool. Got a couple of them sitting in my garage and driveway right now. Anyway, Stuart Zuckerman said, what software version do these cars have? Is it the same version as what we are using on our HW Hardware 4 cars, or is it a newer version that will be available to us soon? Elon said it's a new version of software, what will merge to main branch soon. So as should probably surprise nobody, this is its own version of the software that they're working very, very hard to tune to the Austin area right now to make it work as well as possible. But it's going to come out on the main branch that all of us will receive at some point in the future, and you'll see down below the approximate timeline here. We have a more advanced model in alpha stage that has approximately 4 times the parameters, but still requires a lot of polishing. That's probably ready for deployment in a few months. So we've got 2 different versions of full self-driving going on here that he's discussing. Number 1 is the sort of Austin specific version of the software. So call it 13.3 or something along those lines. Anyway, that is being fine-tuned for the Austin area, but will be pushed out to the main branch relatively quickly. After that, could be within a couple of weeks, maybe by mid-July, something along those lines. We will see. Then there's also a much earlier stage model, alpha stage model, that has approximately 4 times the parameters. So parameters are the number of little knobs that you can tune in a model. So just arbitrarily, I don't know what the actual number is, but say that there is 1 billion in the current model. There's 1 billion of these little knobs that you can tune. This is a neural network. That's basically how a neural network works. If there are 1 billion in the current model, we're looking at 4 billion in the next model. And again, that's just a number I'm just drawing out of my butt, right? So that's not the actual number of parameters, but I'm just saying 4x is a big, big increase in the number of parameters. It puts a lot more stress on the hardware 4 module because, of course, you're talking about a lot more parameters, and it's got to be able to multiply all those numbers and do all the math and everything at the same speed as the old model that is 4 times smaller. That is a huge, huge ask. So really interesting that they're pushing on this as much as they are. Obviously, he says, still needs a lot of polishing and everything, but it's probably ready for deployment in a few months. So let's call that end of September, October, somewhere in that range. That seems probably a reasonable estimate based on what he's talking about here. So that's not something that's coming really soon, but at 4 times the number of parameters, if it can still run at 36 frames per second, which is approximately what full self-driving runs at currently, if it can still run at that kind of a speed with 4 times the number of parameters, it should be much smarter and be able to handle a lot more situations and not make those kind of once in a while dumb mistakes that full self-driving still does. And then we have a conversation between Holmar's catalog and Elon Musk. Holmar says, does the robotaxi software have 3 times larger model compared to 13.2.9, or will we just get the 4 times parameters later this year? So the question that Holmar's is asking, this is 2 different versions of the software. Number 1 is the one that's in Austin right now. Is that a 3x larger model, or is it more or less the same model that we have currently in our Tesla Model Ys? Or will they just jump straight to the 4x larger number of parameters later this year? So Elon kind of doesn't address the first part of the question, but the second. Anyway, he says approximately 4.5x increase in parameters should be ready for wide release later this year. So that goes along with what he was saying earlier. And then he adds to that super frugal use of memory bandwidth, caching exactly what is needed and squeezing microseconds out of everything are needed to maintain the frame rate. And the whole system needs to be retrained. So basically, that's exactly what I was talking about. If you have 4.5 times the number of parameters, you've got to do all that math. It's 4.5 times more math that you're having to do, 4.5 times more data that's being shuttled between different parts of the neural network across the memory bandwidth. That is an exceptional amount of extra pressure to put on the same hardware, right? You're not changing the chips out. You're using the same hardware for chips. There is a lot of stress being put on those chips. So they're being very, very frugal with the use of memory bandwidth. They're only transferring exactly what needs to be done. They're caching what's needed to be cached, and they're squeezing it to get microseconds out of the calculations to keep it at approximately 36 frames per second, which is what the older version of the software operates at, which we've known about for a long time because they said that the frame rate of the cameras was the limiting factor at that point, and that was 36 frames per second. And then, of course, Elon says, and the whole system needs to be retrained, which is why this is going to take quite a while. Even with the Cortex supercomputer they now have in Austin to do the training, it's still going to take a big chunk of time. And obviously, they're using most of their resources, both human and compute right now, to get the Austin version of the software as polished as possible prior to June 22nd or whenever they release it. And then this isn't specific to Tesla right now, but it's an interesting response to Robert Scoble, who talks about how Tesla has done their training. Elon's response to this is the streets will change very rapidly. And I agree with this. Once you actually get these robotaxis and they work, it should make changes very, very quickly if they're safer than humans. It's going to be kind of an ethical responsibility of the world to transition to autonomous driving if possible. Anyway, he said autonomous cars will be very common throughout the world in 2 to 3 years. So 2 to 3 years to be very common seems a little ambitious to me. I mean, it just takes a long time for cars. Cars live a long time. They live 10 to 20 years. So it takes a long time to transition a fleet of vehicles into the new fleet. Now, if he means very common as in every Tesla will be able to do this in 2 to 3 years, then sure, that makes sense. But Teslas are not, they don't make up that huge of a percentage of the vehicles in the world. So I think very common might be an overstatement. But the idea that all Teslas, at least all the ones with hardware 4 in them, will be able to be driving on their own in 2 to 3 years seems very reasonable at this point. And then one more post from Elon Musk, and then we're going to talk about Grok in a little bit more detail here. Anyway, he said also on June 10th, Tesla AI autopilot could probably beat the best human around a track already. So that's an interesting statement. I don't know if these vehicles are trained to go 200 miles an hour around a track, but they do certainly have faster reaction times than human beings, so that's very cool. Anyway, he said eventually it won't be a contest at all. Human reflexes cannot match machines. That's absolutely true, of course. But whether they can do that today or not, that's an interesting question. And then a couple of notes from Grok as we were talking about this kind of thing. On June 17th, Elon claimed FSD is 10 times safer than human drivers in Austin tests, with plans to expand to LA and San Francisco by August of 2025. So that's the first I've heard of this. Also on June 17th, which is just yesterday again, Musk responded to a video of a Tesla avoiding a deer, stating FSD's neural nets are trained to handle such scenarios, showcasing real-time adaptability. And I live in a neighborhood where there are lots and lots of deer. I can't even tell you how many. I mean, it's 3 or 4 dozen deer that live in the neighborhood. And in the mornings and especially the evenings, they tend to eat a lot out in the lawns and everything, and they tend to cross the roads and stuff. So I have multiple times had my Tesla stop for deer and let them cross the road. It's really, really good at that. And I have to say from my own personal experience, multiple times the vehicle has stopped for deer, and it's been really, really good about that. So I will back that up with personal experience. And then finally, this is more speculative, but of course, talk has been that Grok would be integrated into Tesla's full self-driving. And there has been recent developments, actually over the past couple of months, that have shown that there appears to be code to utilize utilize Grok within Tesla's full self-driving. Now, can that be run entirely on the edge? Almost definitely not, because Tesla is they're basically using 100% of the CPU, GPU, whatever, the entire hardware stack to run full self-driving. Now, would that have a small amount of extra bandwidth to upload things to the cloud, to say ask questions or something, and have Grok work on its Colossus supercluster and come back with an answer for the user, and then have that stream to the user and then give a voice interface to it? Yeah, it probably has enough of that because it's got a whole entertainment stack as well, and it can utilize that stack to be able to do that sort of interface. So Grok is not going to be built into full self-driving, at least with hardware 4. Maybe with hardware 5, it'll have enough headroom to be able to do both of these things. But there is some evidence that there is code built into Tesla's full self-driving autopilot stack at this point that will allow Grok to interface with full self-driving and with the human to act as like an intermediary. So as it says here, you could talk to it and say, take me to In-N-Out, but of course you can do that already. You can talk to the car and you can say navigate to an In-N-Out, and it will give you a list of them. More to the point with a large language model like Grok would be something like, I'm hungry, and it might say, well, I see from your preferences that you prefer Mexican food. Would you like to go to one of these places? And you're like, nah, not today. I'm more in the mood for something else. And it's like, well, how about Thai food? And it gives you, that kind of thing where you could have a conversation with it. If you just want to go to an In-N-Out burger, you can do that currently. That's pretty straightforward to do already. Push the microphone button, ask, it'll give you a list of In-N-Out burgers, at least if you live in that area. For me, it would be a very long commute to get to an In-N-Out. But anyway, that's what you would do, is you would have a conversation with it. You could also say something like, why did we slow down right now, right? If the car just mysteriously slows down, I don't know that Grok would know the answer because it's going to have to pull full self-driving and get that information out of it. But if it can do that, it would be able to tell you what happened and why it slowed down. And it could be doing that while the full self-driving was still operational. So that would be very cool as well. And I will add to this that specifically for robotaxi use, this could be very, very critical. You could have Grok actually, kind of come in and say, sorry, we've had to reroute right now. It's going to take an extra 5 minutes, some sort of voice interface. Or if the car got stuck or something, it could talk to the passengers and say, hey, I know we got stuck in this alley and we can't get out. A human is just about to intervene and back the car up and turn it so that it can get back on the route or something. So just a voice interface to allow people to be able to be comfortable with what's going on and have some sort of a, quasi-human thing that's talking to you about what's going on in your ride. So that seems to me to be an even more sort of critical use case for this type of technology. The other stuff is fun and really nice to have, but for a robotaxi, it could be very necessary. It's the same basic idea as if your Uber driver suddenly goes off route or something and you're like, why did you just do that? And they're like, oh, I know this. This is like a secret back way that can usually save several minutes. I've had some Uber drivers do that before, and they've been right, generally speaking, over the GPS. So anyway, Grok could interface with you in that sense and could tell you what's going on. So I think that would be an even more, near-term critical use case that could be really, really cool. All right, so that's the state of the art as things are right now. We are getting very, very close to the tentative go live date on June 22nd. What do you think? Do you think that Tesla is going to be ready for prime time with all of these developments, or is it going to take them a couple of weeks or a couple of months longer to release their robotaxis into the wild? Definitely let me know in the comments. While you're down there, if you don't mind liking the video, it really helps other people to find it. And of course, if you want more of this kind of content and stuff about AI in general, consider subscribing to the channel, and I will see you in the next video. Bye-bye.